A silent giant of stone holds secrets far darker than any gladiator's sword. We know the roar of the crowds and the flash of steel, but the true story of the Roman Colosseum is buried under 2,000 years of myth. By the end of this journey, your understanding of ancient Rome will be completely transformed. We will uncover how this arena was built on a drained lake, why it once hosted epic naval battles, and what mysterious world lies hidden beneath its floor. What single image of the ancient world feels most real to you? That iconic name, the Colosseum, was never its true title. The Romans knew this grand structure as the Flavian Amphitheatre, a name honoring the imperial dynasty that brought it to life. The nickname we all use today has a far more curious origin. It comes from a truly colossal statue, a monstrous bronze figure of the former Emperor Nero that stood nearby. This statue was so immense it became a local landmark, and over centuries people began referring to the amphitheater next to it simply as the colossal place, the Colosseum. But the story of why it was built here is even more significant. Emperor Vespasian, the first ruler of the Flavian line, made a profound political decision. He chose to construct this monumental gift to the people on the very spot where his despised predecessor, Nero, had built a lavish private palace and an artificial lake for his own pleasure. By draining that lake and using the land for a public arena, Vespasian was sending an unmistakable message. He was literally returning the heart of Rome to its citizens, transforming a symbol of a selfish tyrant's excess into the world's greatest stage for popular entertainment. This was not just architecture, it was a masterstroke of political theater, a permanent declaration that the new emperor served the public, not just himself. Draining that vast artificial lake was a declaration of war against the past itself. The Stagnum Nerinus was no simple pond. It was a massive, man-made body of water, the centerpiece of a selfish emperor's sprawling private pleasure garden. To erase it, Roman engineers performed what can only be described as hydrological magic. They did not merely pump the water out, they commanded it to leave. A complex network of drains and subterranean channels was carved deep into the earth, redirecting the water flow and systematically dewatering the entire basin. Imagine the sheer scale of this operation, one of the most ambitious construction sites in the ancient world, where the first task was to make a lake disappear. Once the land was exposed and stable, the real work could begin, laying the colossal foundation that would need to support an arena for tens of thousands. The Romans built a giant concrete oval foundation, a ring of stone and mortar that was both incredibly strong and cleverly designed to distribute the immense weight of the structure above. This was not just about building something new, it was about burying the old. Every stone set into that foundation was another nail in the coffin of Nero's memory, transforming his private vanity into Rome's most public square. The very ground beneath the Colosseum is a monument to engineering and a powerful act of political erasure. Yet this monumental transformation from drained lake to architectural wonder happened with a speed that would be unimaginable today. The entire Colosseum was erected in just under a decade, from around the year 70 to the year 80 AD. To put that in perspective, consider how long it takes to build a single modern sports stadium, often spanning many years. The Romans achieved this breathtaking pace through a combination of ruthless efficiency and a vast, tragically exploited workforce. Following the brutal siege of Jerusalem, tens of thousands of Jewish prisoners were brought to Rome in chains. These captives formed the backbone of the construction effort, an immense labor force toiling under the harsh Roman sun. But raw manpower alone was not the secret. The Romans perfected a modular construction technique, treating the massive amphitheater not as one single project, but as dozens of smaller, identical ones. They built the giant outer walls in repeating sections, with each team of workers responsible for their own segment, creating a kind of assembly line of stone. This allowed for work to proceed simultaneously all around the oval circumference, a perfectly orchestrated symphony of organized chaos. The result was a structure born from both incredible human ingenuity and profound human suffering, raised to the heavens in a fraction of the time it should have taken. This breathtaking speed of construction was matched only by the brilliant efficiency of its daily operation. With a crowd of roughly 50,000 people needing to find their seats, the Colosseum could not afford chaos. Its entry system was a masterpiece of ancient crowd control. Each spectator held a small, numbered piece of pottery called a tesserae. This was their ticket, and its number corresponded to one of the Colosseum's 76 meticulously numbered public entrances. Think of it like a modern concert or sporting event, but imagine if every single person knew exactly which door to use, with no confusion and no long, winding queues. This simple system of pottery shards funneled the massive crowd into the building with a speed and order that would impress us even today. Once inside, however, the Roman social order was laid bare for all to see. Your ticket did more than just grant you entry. It dictated your entire experience, mapping the rigid hierarchy of Roman society directly onto the stone steps. At the very best spot, right along the arena's edge, was the imperial box, the pulvinar. This was a sacred space reserved for the emperor and his most important priests, a throne from which he could be seen by all. The rows immediately behind him were for senators, dressed in their distinctive white togas. Above them sat the equestrians, the wealthy upper middle class of knights and businessmen. Further up were the ordinary male Roman citizens, and then at the very top, crammed into the cheapest standing room-only section, were everyone else, women, the poor, and enslaved individuals. This was not just seating, it was a vertical diagram of power and status, a constant, visible reminder to every single person of their precise place in the world. But the experience inside the Colosseum was about more than just your seat. It was about your comfort under the relentless Roman sun. High above the heads of the senators and the emperor himself stretched a marvel of engineering that seemed to defy the very sky, the velarium. This was not a simple tent. It was a gigantic, retractable canvas awning, a massive sun shield designed to protect the entire audience from the elements. Picture a colossal sail, but one that covered an area so vast it could cast shade over 50,000 people at once. Operating this complex system of ropes, pulleys, and heavy fabric required a specific kind of expertise, a knowledge of rigging and wind that no ordinary stagehand possessed. For this task, Rome turned to its most skilled sailors. A special unit of Marines from the Misenum fleet, the empire's most important naval base, was permanently stationed in the capital. These were not soldiers pulled from the battlefield, but highly trained sailors whose sole duty was to master the velarium. They would scramble along a network of ropes high in the upper vaults, a dizzying web of rigging that turned the top of the amphitheatre into the deck of a giant stone ship. On their command, the enormous canvas would unfurl or retract, a silent, mechanical cloud controlled by the hands of men who understood the wind. It was a breathtaking display of practical ingenuity, using the technology of naval warfare to create a moment of public comfort, proving that Roman innovation extended far beyond the spectacle of combat in the sand below. Yet for all the comfort provided by that massive awning above, a far more complex and hidden world existed directly beneath the spectators' feet. Below the wooden arena floor lay the hypogeum, a two-level subterranean labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, and machinery. This was the true engine room of the Colosseum, a place where the magic and the mechanics of the spectacle were born. Imagine a dark, cramped city buzzing with frantic activity, completely invisible to the crowd. Down here, slaves, stagehands, and animal handlers moved through a network of corridors preparing for the performances above. Cages holding lions, bears, and exotic beasts from across the empire lined the walls, their growls and scent filling the damp air. Gladiators waited in holding cells, mentally preparing for combat, mere feet away from the animals they might soon face. This hidden world was the key to the arena's greatest theatrical trick, the ability to make the impossible seem real. How could a group of warriors suddenly appear in the center of the sand as if from nowhere? How could a full-grown bear materialize before the audience's eyes? The answer lay in a system of ramps, pulleys, and elevators. The Romans installed sophisticated wooden platforms, hoisted by a complex arrangement of ropes and counterweights that could lift men, animals, and even entire stage sets from the darkness below up to the bright light of the arena. With a sudden rumble and a dramatic burst through trapdoors in the floor, these elevators created shocking and surprising entrances, making beasts and fighters erupt from the ground itself. This was ancient special effects at its most brilliant, a masterful combination of engineering and stagecraft designed to keep the audience in a constant state of awe and suspense. But all that engineering beneath the floor was capable of something even more spectacular than lifting gladiators. The entire arena could be transformed into a lake. For special, breathtakingly expensive events, the Romans would flood the Colosseum to stage full-scale mock naval battles called naumatia. This was not a simple splash of water. It was a deliberate, complex flooding of the entire basin to a depth sufficient to float actual warships. To achieve this aquatic miracle, the Romans tapped directly into their most vital civic achievement, the aqueducts. A dedicated branch of the Aqua Claudia aqueduct was constructed to channel a massive volume of water directly into the hypogeum, filling the sealed arena from below. The same intricate network of drains that had once emptied Nero's lake was now used in reverse, turning the Colosseum's foundation into a giant, shallow reservoir. Imagine the sheer volume of water required to float even small ships, and the incredible pressure placed on the arena's waterproofed floor and walls. It was a staggering logistical feat, a testament to an empire that viewed controlling water as a fundamental part of its power. The ships that fought in these artificial lakes were not mere models. They were scaled-down but fully functional galleys, manned by thousands of combatants who were not professional sailors, but condemned criminals and prisoners of war forced to reenact famous naval victories from Rome's past. These were not mock battles in the way we think of them today. They were brutal, chaotic, and often deadly struggles, a grim piece of living theater where the only script was survival, and the only reward for the victors might be a pardon. The entire spectacle, from the first trickle of water to the final sinking ship, was a display of imperial power so complete that it could command the very sea to appear in the heart of the city, only to vanish once the blood had been washed away. The roar of the crowds eventually fell silent, but the stone giant never truly died. Long after the last gladiator combat and the final staged sea battle, the Colosseum began a strange and unexpected second life. When the Roman Empire crumbled, this iconic amphitheater was far too valuable to simply abandon. In the Middle Ages, it was seized by one of Rome's most powerful families, the Frangipani, who transformed it into a formidable fortified castle. They reinforced its mighty walls and arches, turning a symbol of public entertainment into a private stronghold, a fortress guarding the family's power within a crumbling city. But its purpose shifted again, this time toward the sacred. A small church was established within its vast arcades, and the arena itself was consecrated as a site of Christian worship, a place believed to be sanctified by the blood of the martyrs who had died there. This belief, though historically debated, was powerful enough to save the structure from complete demolition. Yet the Colosseum also became a victim of its own perfection. For centuries, it served as Rome's most convenient quarry. Popes and builders systematically plundered its travertine stone, carting it away to construct new marvels, including the foundations of St. Peter's Basilica. The very material that had once echoed with the cheers of citizens was repurposed for the pillars of the Vatican, and then nature began to reclaim its own. Seeds from exotic plants carried across the empire in the fur and dung of animals brought here for the games took root in the ruins. botanists would later discover a unique microcosm of flora thriving within the walls, a living, green echo of all the distant lands that Rome had once conquered. This stone skeleton was never just a relic. It was a fortress, a shrine, a quarry, and a garden, constantly being reborn for 1,000 years after its original purpose had faded away. This hidden machinery of the hypogeum was built for one primary purpose: to deliver death on an industrial scale. While we often remember the gladiators, the greatest bloodshed in the Colosseum was reserved for the animals. The Venations, or wild beast hunts, were carnivals of slaughter that dwarfed everything else. To understand the sheer volume, we must look at the inaugural games held by the Emperor Titus. For this 100-day festival, ancient historians recorded that a staggering 9,000 animals were killed. This was not an isolated event, it was the standard. The games were a relentless drain on the wildlife of the entire Mediterranean world and beyond. The arena floor became a global stage for extinction. North African elephants, creatures that once roamed the coasts in great herds, were captured and shipped to Rome to be butchered for a single afternoon's entertainment. The mighty Syrian lion, a distinct and formidable subspecies, was hunted to complete local annihilation for the sake of the games. Even the formidable hippopotamus, hauled all the way from the Nile, found no sanctuary within the Colosseum's walls. This was not merely hunting, it was a systematic eradication. The Roman appetite for exotic death was so immense that it literally reshaped the ecosystems of its provinces, wiping magnificent species from their native lands forever just to prove that nothing, not even nature itself, was beyond the empire's power to conquer and consume. That inaugural 100-day spectacle was far more than a celebration. It was an imperial statement written in blood and sand. Emperor Titus used the games to inaugurate his family's grand amphitheatre, and in doing so, he set a terrifying new standard for what Roman entertainment could be. For 100 consecutive days, the city of Rome effectively shut down. Business was suspended, the courts were closed, and the entire population was invited to partake in a continuous, state-sponsored festival of unimaginable scale. The schedule was relentless, a brutal marathon of death designed to overwhelm the senses and cement the Flavian dynasty's popularity. Each sunrise brought a new program of executions, animal hunts, and gladiatorial combats, all choreographed to fill every single moment with drama and violence. The scale of the slaughter was engineered to be incomprehensible, a tidal wave of death meant to stun the populace into a state of awe and gratitude. How could anyone ever forget the emperor who provided such a gift? This was not just a party, it was a political tool of the most potent kind, binding the people's loyalty to their ruler through a shared experience of spectacular, state-sanctioned carnage. The precedent set by Titus would haunt the empire for centuries, creating an insatiable public appetite that future emperors felt compelled to feed, often at a ruinous cost to the treasury and the moral fabric of the state itself. The machinery of the hypogeum was not just for entertainment, it was also an instrument of public justice and terror. While gladiators could achieve a strange form of glory, the fate of others in the arena was one of pure theatrical execution. The most notorious of these was damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. Criminals, slaves who had rebelled, and those the state deemed enemies, including many early Christians, were led into the arena unarmed. They faced starved predators in a grim, one-sided slaughter designed to demonstrate the absolute power of Rome and its laws. But the Romans infused even these brutal acts with a chilling sense of theater. They did not simply throw people to lions, they staged elaborate mythological reenactments. A convict might be dressed as the rebellious Prometheus, chained to a rock while an eagle, played by a trained bear or leopard, would tear at his flesh. Another might become Icarus, hoisted high into the air on a crane only to be released to fall before the crowd. The same trapdoors and elevators that created magical entrances for gladiators could be used to launch fire or release swarms of wild animals onto a single, helpless individual. This was death as a public spectacle, a horrifying blend of ritual punishment and special effects that reinforced a clear message to every citizen. The power of the empire was so absolute it could rewrite mythology with human suffering, turning the sand of the arena into a stage for the gods' most brutal judgments. Even the most powerful man in the world needed a discreet exit. While 50,000 citizens streamed through 76 public gates, the emperor had a secret of his own, a private underground passage that connected the heart of the arena directly to his palace on the Palatine Hill. This was not a simple back door, it was a dedicated, secure corridor running beneath the city streets, a hidden artery of imperial power. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a private subway line reserved for one single passenger. This tunnel provided the ultimate convenience and security, allowing the emperor to appear in his imperial box as if by magic, and more importantly, to vanish just as quickly when the games were done or if the mood of the massive crowd suddenly turned dangerous. But its purpose went even deeper than mere safety. This passage also linked the Colosseum to the Ludus Magnus, the largest and most important gladiator school in Rome, which stood just a stone's throw away from the amphitheatre's eastern wall. Through this subterranean network, the emperor could inspect the fighters before they battled, or summon a particular champion for a private audience without anyone in the crowd ever knowing. It was the ultimate symbol of control, a physical reminder that the man who held the power of life and death over the combatants in the sand was never truly far away, his presence and his influence flowing silently beneath the feet of the very public he entertained. Even the emperor's secret tunnel could not compare to the engineering marvel happening in plain sight, or rather, in plain hearing. A single whisper on the arena floor could travel with perfect clarity to the highest, cheapest seats. This was no accident, but the result of brilliant acoustic design woven into the very stone. Modern studies have revealed the Colosseum as a giant, open-air sound bowl. The secret lies in its perfect oval shape and the precise, repetitive geometry of its arched corridors and stepped seating. Every surface was calculated to capture and reflect sound waves, not absorb them. The constant hum of 50,000 voices was actually dampened by the specific arrangement of the seating, which helped to prevent echoes from crashing into one another and creating a muddled roar. This left a clear channel for the sharp, direct sounds from the center of the arena to travel upward. Think of it like the difference between shouting in a furnished room and shouting in an empty, tiled bathroom. One swallows sound, the other amplifies it. The Colosseum's architects built an empty, stone bathroom on a colossal scale. A fallen gladiator's final plea for mercy, the guttural roar of a lion, or the crisp command of a game's presenter did not have to compete with the crowd. They rode over it, carried by an invisible architecture of air and vibration that made every gasp and groan a shared, intimate experience for all. But even the most brilliant acoustics could not carry the sound of prayer. The Colosseum's transformation from a place of death to a sanctuary of faith is one of its most profound mysteries. Centuries after the last gladiator fell, the memory of the arena took on a new and powerful meaning for a rising faith. Christians began to venerate the Colosseum as a site where early martyrs had been executed for their beliefs, sanctifying the sand with their blood. This belief, whether historically precise or spiritually potent, fundamentally altered the building's destiny. It saved the great amphitheatre from being completely dismantled for its stone, as it was now seen as a sacred place. This reverence was formally recognized in the 18th century when Pope Benedict XIV consecrated the Colosseum, officially declaring it a Christian martyr's site. He erected a large cross in the arena, permanently marking the space for worship. This act completed a symbolic inversion that would have been unthinkable to the ancient Romans, turning the empire's greatest symbol of pagan power into a monument to the faith it had once tried to eradicate. This new role is most powerfully visible each year on Good Friday. The Pope leads the way of the cross procession, a solemn, torchlit walk that retraces the final hours of Jesus Christ. Thousands of faithful gather within the ruined oval, their flickering torches casting shadows on the very stones that once witnessed so much violence. The voices that now rise into the night air are not cheers for death, but prayers for redemption. The Colosseum, once a machine for public spectacle, has become a vessel for collective memory and mourning, its brutal past forever intertwined with a message of sacrifice and hope. A closer look at the Colosseum's silhouette reveals a startling gap in its southern side. This massive absence is not the slow work of time, but the sudden, violent signature of a single event. In the year 1349, a tremendous earthquake shook the very foundations of Rome. The Colosseum, already centuries old, was built on unstable alluvial soil, a soft foundation left by the ancient lake that once occupied the site. When the earth convulsed the weaker southern side, its foundation saturated with groundwater could not withstand the shock. A huge portion of the outer wall tore free and crashed to the ground in a thunderous avalanche of travertine stone. The resulting debris field was a mountain of perfectly cut, high-quality building material, and for a city rebuilding from disaster, it was a gift. The fallen stones were not left as ruins, they were systematically harvested. For generations, this open wound in the Colosseum's side served as a convenient quarry for the popes and nobles of Renaissance Rome. The very blocks that had once echoed with the steps of emperors were carted away to build new palaces, bridges, and even the foundations of St. Peter's Basilica. The missing wall is more than damage. It is a testament to how this eternal monument was perpetually recycled, its stone giving life to new dreams long after its own glory days had passed. The floor you picture was not a permanent fixture, but a dynamic stage. That vast wooden platform covered in a layer of golden sand was the world's first retractable floor. This sand, called harina in Latin, is the very root of our word arena. It served a grimly practical purpose, absorbing the blood and waste of combat, creating a fresh, neutral surface for each new act of the spectacle. But its true genius lay in its impermanence. The entire floor was a complex piece of machinery, a patchwork of traps and removable sections operated by the crews in the hypogeum below. Imagine the scene. One moment, two gladiators are locked in a dramatic duel on a solid surface. Then, with a deep rumble and a cloud of dust, a large section of the floor directly beneath them would suddenly pivot or drop away. The fighters would have to scramble for solid ground as a cage containing a snarling leopard was winched up from the darkness to take their place. This was not a slow change of sets, it was a rapid, breathtaking transformation. The arena could shift from a gladiator's stage to a hunter's forest or a mythological landscape in a matter of moments, keeping the audience in a perpetual state of surprise. This engineering marvel turned the Colosseum into the ultimate theatrical machine, where the very ground beneath the performer's feet was an illusion, always ready to collapse and reveal the next terrifying wonder. The Hollywood image of a gladiator's life ending in a bloody finale is a powerful lie. In reality, a trained gladiator was a costly investment, a finely tuned athlete whose owner had poured significant money into his training, food, and medical care. Killing such a valuable asset in his first fight made no financial sense. Most combats were carefully regulated sporting events, not chaotic massacres. The goal was to display skill and courage, not necessarily to kill. A referee often oversaw the match, and many fights ended when one fighter was simply wounded, exhausted, or disarmed. The final decision on life or death did rest with the editor, the wealthy sponsor of the games, who would typically look to the crowd for their reaction. But here is the crucial twist: a thumbs down did not originally mean kill. Historical evidence suggests it more likely meant lower your sword, a call to spare the defeated man. The famous thumbs up, meanwhile, was the signal for the death stroke. This system meant a skilled gladiator could survive dozens of bouts over many years. The most successful fighters became true celebrities, their names and fighting styles painted on walls by adoring fans. They could amass considerable wealth from their prize money and gifts, and the very best could even earn their freedom, retiring as coaches or wealthy men. Their lives were brutal and short, but for the stars of the arena, death was a bad business decision, not an inevitable outcome. That missing southern wall tells only half the story of its battle with the earth. The Colosseum's survival for 2,000 years is not a miracle of luck, but a masterpiece of deliberate, revolutionary engineering. Its architects designed it to be flexible, to sway and absorb the energy of earthquakes rather than resist them with brittle strength. This secret resilience lies in the brilliant combination of different materials used throughout its construction. The heavy ground floor piers, the true load-bearing skeleton of the structure, were built from massive blocks of travertine limestone. This stone is incredibly strong in compression, perfect for supporting the immense weight above. But as the building rises, the materials change. The inner walls on the upper levels shift to a lighter volcanic stone called tufa, and then further up to even lighter brick-faced concrete. The very topmost arches were built using a secret ingredient, pumice stone, one of the only naturally lightweight stones available to the Romans. This created a graduated structure, heavy and stable at the base, progressively lighter and more flexible towards the summit. When an earthquake struck, the entire building was designed to move as a single, unified unit. The heavy base provided anchor, while the lighter top could sway and oscillate without building up catastrophic stress. It was a seismic dance, a calculated flexibility that allowed the giant to roll with the punches of the planet itself. This ancient understanding of dynamic loads and material science is a principle that modern earthquake engineers still use today, proving that the Romans were not just builders of monuments, but masters of making them endure. The true price of admission was not paid in coin, but in loyalty. Every seat in that vast amphitheater was free for a Roman citizen to claim. This was no simple act of generosity. It was the cornerstone of a brilliant and cynical political strategy known as panem et circenses, bread and circuses. The idea was simple yet devastatingly effective. To keep the populace content and compliant, the state would provide their two most basic needs, food and entertainment. An idle, hungry crowd might question their leaders or even revolt, but a well-fed crowd dazzled by epic spectacles would remain docile and grateful. The games were the ultimate distraction, a tool of social control on a monumental scale. But the emperor's generosity did not stop at the arena gates. To ensure the people's devotion, the gifts often continued during the spectacle itself. Attendants would sometimes pass through the crowds, distributing vouchers made of wood or pottery. These were not for simple snacks. They could be redeemed for lavish quantities of pork, bread, or even gold coins. On truly extravagant occasions, the emperor himself would stand and throw tokens directly into the roaring stands. A lucky catch might grant the holder a fine piece of jewelry, a bag of silver, or the deed to a new slave. Imagine the frenzy, the sheer desperation as a small piece of carved wood, a tessera, flew through the air, a ticket to instant fortune for one citizen among 50,000. This was more than a lottery. It was a performance of imperial power and benevolence, a constant reminder that the emperor was not just a ruler, but a provider, his favor as random and as life-changing as the turn of a gladiator's blade. The roar of the crowd was not just for the blood on the sand, but for the chance of a golden reward from the hand of the man who controlled it all. The roar of the crowd for gladiators fell silent long before the empire itself crumbled. In the year 435, Emperor Honorius issued a formal decree that officially banned gladiatorial combat across the entire Roman world. This was not a sudden change of heart, but the culmination of a slow cultural shift. For decades, the growing influence of Christianity, with its doctrine valuing human life, had been turning public opinion against the spectacle of men killing each other for sport. The cost of training and maintaining these specialized fighters had also become a burden the struggling Western Empire could no longer easily bear, yet the public appetite for spectacle was not so easily extinguished. While the gladiator was gone, the wild beast hunts, the Venetians, raged on for nearly another century. This reveals a fascinating distinction in the Roman mindset, a willingness to end the slaughter of humans while still embracing the slaughter of exotic animals from the far corners of their shrinking empire. The end of the gladiator was a quiet, administrative death, not a dramatic finale in the sand. It signaled that the heart of Roman entertainment was changing, even as the outer shell of its traditions stubbornly remained. Yet long after the blood-soaked sand was forgotten, the Colosseum began to bloom with a strange and silent life of its own. By the middle of the 19th century, a dedicated naturalist named Richard Deacon made a startling discovery. He meticulously catalogued every plant he could find growing from the cracks and crevices of the ancient stone, and his final count was a staggering 684 distinct species. This was not a random collection of local weeds, it was a living botanical museum. Many of these plants were exotic species native to North Africa, the Middle East, and the Eastern Mediterranean, places like Syria, Greece, and Palestine. How did flora from such distant lands take root here? The answer lies in the very machinery of the games themselves. Seeds from these regions were accidentally transported to Rome in the most unlikely of ways, hidden in the matted fur of lions, clinging to the hides of elephants, or surviving the digestive tracts of animals captured for the arena. When these creatures were paraded through the city or held in the hypogeum, their bedding, food, and waste all contained the potential for new life. For centuries, these dormant seeds lay trapped in the ruins, waiting for the right conditions of rain and sun to finally germinate. The Colosseum's walls became an accidental ark, preserving a unique green echo of every corner of the empire that had once supplied its horrors, a quiet, living monument to the vast, interconnected world Rome had built and then forgotten. Even the sun itself was a player in the grand spectacle. The Colosseum functioned as one of Rome's most important public timepieces, a colossal sundial whose creeping shadow dictated the rhythm of the entire city. A giant obelisk, originally brought from Egypt by Emperor Augustus, was placed on a specially constructed platform just outside the amphitheatre. This towering stone needle cast a long, precise shadow that swept directly across the Colosseum's vast northern facade. Markers were likely inscribed on the pavement or the building itself, dividing the day into its official hours. This was not a clock for personal use, but the city's central time standard. When the shadow touched a specific point, it signaled the start of legal proceedings in the nearby courts, the closing of important markets, or the final call for merchants to settle their accounts for the day. Most importantly for the crowds gathered there, it dictated the precise beginning of the games. The rising anticipation, the bets being placed, the final vendors hawking their wares, all of it was governed by that silent, moving line of darkness. The entire city, from senators to shopkeepers, synchronized their lives with the shadow of the great amphitheatre, making the stone giant not just a place of entertainment, but the very heartbeat of Roman time. That brilliant white travertine shell we know today is a pale ghost of the original. The Colosseum was a riot of color, a dazzling polychromatic spectacle that would have overwhelmed the senses. Every surface, both inside and out, was painted in vibrant, expensive pigments. The arches of the outer wall were not empty, but filled with gleaming white marble statues, creating a gallery of gods and heroes that watched over the city. As you moved inside, the assault on the eyes only intensified. The interior corridors, which we now see as bare brick, were covered in brilliant frescoes and intricate stucco reliefs. Imagine walking through a tunnel where the walls are a deep, rich red, adorned with golden trim and detailed scenes of mythology. The vaulted ceilings overhead might have been a brilliant sky blue dotted with painted stars. Even the massive columns were not left plain. They were painted to mimic precious marble or gilded with gold leaf to catch the Roman sun. This was not a somber monument of stone. It was a vibrant, living canvas, a declaration of imperial wealth and artistic power designed to stun visitors before they even found their seats. The very sand of the arena was the only neutral space in a building otherwise screaming with color, a deliberate contrast that made the blood and action at its center all the more stark and dramatic. Those faint, ghostly numbers carved into the stone benches are more than just ancient graffiti. They are the last surviving fragments of a vast administrative machine, a system designed to manage the chaos of a city within a city. Each citizen's ticket, that small piece of pottery, corresponded not just to an entrance but to a specific wedge of seating known as a cuneus. The numbers we can still see today mark the boundaries of these sections, guiding people from their assigned doorway directly to their precise spot on the stone steps. This was a level of organization that went far beyond simple crowd control. It was a deliberate act of social engineering. The Roman authorities did not just want to fill the Colosseum, they wanted to map the entire population of Rome into it. People from the same neighborhood, the same trade guild, or even the same social club would be seated together in their designated cuneus. Imagine the scene not as a random mass of individuals, but as a microcosm of the city itself, with every district and community represented in its own little block. This system prevented friends and neighbors from getting lost in the throng, but it also allowed the emperor to see, at a single glance, the mood of every corner of his capital. The roar of a particular section could tell him which part of the city was most enthusiastic or most restless. It turned the act of finding a seat into a powerful tool for surveillance and social management, ensuring that even in a crowd of 50,000, every single person was exactly where they were supposed to be. This sacred reputation began to shape the very earth beneath the ruins, because the Colosseum was widely believed to be a site sanctified by the blood of early Christian martyrs. Its soil was considered holy ground. This was not a vague spiritual idea. It had a profound and practical consequence for medieval Romans. To be buried within the Colosseum's consecrated boundaries was seen as a direct path to salvation, a way to rest for eternity in earth made sacred by martyrdom. This made it one of the most desirable final resting places in all of Christendom, a spiritual real estate more valuable than any plot in a regular churchyard. The demand was so intense that a bustling, solemn economy sprang up around death. Wealthy noble families and powerful churchmen would pay substantial sums to secure a burial plot within the shadow of the great arches. Their tombs began to cluster in the arcades and along the crumbling corridors, turning the monument into a sprawling, vertical cemetery. The Colosseum became a city of the dead nested inside the skeleton of the ancient games, its walls now holding the bones of saints and sinners alike, all seeking the same divine grace. This transformation was so complete that for centuries the primary function of the building in the public mind was not as a ruined arena, but as a holy sepulchre, its violent past literally buried under layers of sanctified soil and the quiet hope of resurrection. Deep within the ghostly silence of the hypogeum, a small chapel once offered solace to those who labored among the dead. Long after the last beast was caged and the final trapdoor sealed, the Colosseum's dark underworld was consecrated as the Church of St. Mary of the Piet. In the 16th century, as the belief in the arena's martyred past solidified, this sacred space was established directly within the ancient tunnels. It served a humble but vital purpose, providing a place of worship for the workers who tended the surrounding vegetable gardens and vineyards that had sprung up in the ruins, and for the devout who came to pray on ground they believed was made holy by sacrifice. Its simple stone altar was erected amidst the stark foundations of the ancient lifts and ramps, a profound juxtaposition of faith and function. Here, prayers for mercy and salvation were offered just feet from the very mechanisms that had once delivered so many to their deaths. This small chapel embodied the Colosseum's complete transformation, its quiet altar standing as a permanent rebuttal to the roaring machinery that once surrounded it, proving that even the darkest places could be reclaimed by hope. Those empty niches high on the outer wall were once filled with life. Every single one of the Colosseum's 240 external arches originally held a statue, a gleaming population of gods, heroes, and emperors cast in precious bronze. This was not a simple decoration, it was a colossal gallery of imperial power, a visual narrative meant to overwhelm any citizen approaching the arena. But today, every single one of these figures is gone, systematically stripped away in a slow-motion dismantling that lasted for centuries. The primary culprit was not weathering or time, but human greed and desperation. Bronze was a strategic material, the lifeblood of both war and commerce. Whenever Rome faced an enemy at its gates or a crisis in its treasury, the city turned on itself, looking inward for the resources to survive. The statues on the Colosseum represented a vast, easily accessible stockpile of metal. In the desperate years following the fall of the Western Roman Empire or during the brutal sacks of the city, these bronze figures were prime targets. They were carefully pried from their stone perches, hauled down and carted off to the forges. There, the face of a god or the form of a legendary hero would be melted in a crucible, its identity erased forever, to be reborn as a sword blade, a cannonball, or the blank face of a new coin. This recycling was so thorough that not a single one of these major statues has ever been found intact. Their absence is a silent testament to the countless times Rome was forced to consume its own glorious past just to secure its uncertain future. Even the stone giant was not immune to the fury of the heavens. Historical records tell us the Colosseum was struck by lightning not once, but multiple times throughout its long history. For the Romans, a lightning strike was never a random act of nature. It was a direct message from Jupiter, the king of the gods, a crackling bolt of divine displeasure sent down from the sky. The most catastrophic of these strikes occurred in the year 217 AD. A tremendous bolt of lightning slammed directly into the upper levels of the amphitheatre, which were largely constructed of wood. The impact instantly ignited a massive fire that raced through the top tiers of seating and the complex network of wooden beams supporting the velarium awning. The flames would have roared through the structure for hours, fed by the dry, aged timber, utterly destroying the uppermost sections of the building. The damage was so extensive that the great arena was forced to close for a full 5 years for repairs. For the superstitious Romans, this was not a simple accident. It was a terrifying omen, a public sign that the gods themselves were angry, perhaps with the emperor of the time or with the very nature of the bloodshed taking place within the sacred arena's walls. This event forced a long, silent pause in the spectacle, a period of reflection imposed not by man, but by a force even the empire could not control. The silent corridors of this ancient monument offered shelter to more than just the dead. In the 13th century, a different kind of inhabitant claimed the Colosseum's stones, a monk who sought not spectacle but solitude. This man, a hermit of the Benedictine order, transformed a small section of the vast ruins into his personal sanctuary. He did not see a decaying arena, but a place of profound spiritual retreat. He cultivated a humble vegetable garden within the shelter of the arches, his simple crops growing from soil enriched by centuries of history. He built a small hut, a hermitage nestled against the colossal walls where he could pray and meditate day and night. This was not an isolated act, but part of a wider movement. Throughout the Middle Ages, other religious ascetics followed his example, drawn to the Colosseum's powerful aura of martyrdom and its stark, imposing silence. Their presence was a quiet, living protest against the worldly grandeur the building once represented. By consecrating the space through their devotion and their daily lives, these hermits played a crucial, unsung role in the Colosseum's survival. They reinforced the growing public belief that this was holy ground, a belief that made popes and citizens alike hesitate to plunder its stones for fear of desecrating a sacred site. The hermit's garden was more than a source of food, it was a seed of preservation, its roots helping to anchor the great ruin against the tides of destruction for centuries to come. That silent hermit's sanctuary now welcomes a different kind of pilgrim. The Colosseum today stands as the world's most popular tourist attraction, drawing more than 7 million visitors from every corner of the globe each year. They walk the same stone where gladiators once trod, their modern footsteps echoing where crowds of 50,000 once roared. This immense popularity, however, brings its own unique threat to the ancient stone. The constant vibration from millions of feet, the exhalations of countless visitors, and the corrosive grime of a modern city create a perfect storm of decay, slowly eating away at the travertine. Conservation is now a never-ending battle fought with quiet, scientific precision. Teams of restorers work year-round, carefully cleaning the stone with laser technology that vaporizes centuries of black pollution without touching the ancient surface beneath. They inject stabilizing resins into cracks and monitor the slightest shift in the giant's posture with a network of sensitive electronic sensors. This is not merely preservation, it is a form of delicate medicine for a 2,000-year-old patient. The goal is to strike a perfect balance, allowing the world to witness this monument to human ingenuity and brutality, while ensuring its silent stories endure for generations yet to come. This stone giant was never just one thing. It was an arena that could become a lake, a stage that birthed wild animals from beneath the floor, and a fortress that later became a sacred shrine. It has been a royal palace, a holy cemetery, and even a vast, accidental garden blooming with the seeds of a forgotten empire. Each layer of its history peels back to reveal another, 1,000 years of stories etched into its very stone. The Colosseum is not a ruin. It is a living history book, its chapters written in engineering, blood, faith, and flora. A permanent record of Rome's incredible ambition and its complex, enduring legacy. So we turn it over to you now. Which of these facts reshaped your view of this ancient wonder the most? Was it the naval battles, the secret world of the hypogeum, or its quiet life as a botanical ark? And tell us, what other legendary place shrouded in mystery should we explore together next? 2,000 years later, the roar of the Colosseum's crowds has found a new home in your living room. Its image is so deeply embedded in our global consciousness that we hardly question it, from the dramatic final showdown in the film Gladiator to its pixel-perfect recreations in blockbuster video games. This is not mere historical homage, it is proof that the arena's power as a storytelling stage is truly eternal. Modern filmmakers and game designers are drawn to its iconic arches for the same reason the Roman emperors were. It provides an instantly recognizable, emotionally charged backdrop for epic tales of conflict, sacrifice, and spectacle. The arena's very shape creates a natural theater, forcing a dramatic confrontation between hero and foe, individual and system, with the fate of the character literally resting in the hands of an unseen crowd. This cinematic legacy has, in turn, reshaped our very perception of the ancient world, defining for millions what ancient Rome looked, felt, and even sounded like. But the Colosseum's influence extends far beyond the screen. Look at any major modern sports stadium, from Olympic grandstands to colossal football arenas. Their circular or oval bowls, their tiered seating that prioritizes VIPs at the center, and their massive, arched facades are all direct architectural descendants of the Roman blueprint. We have unconsciously rebuilt the Colosseum in every major city on Earth, replicating its social geometry and its purpose as a container for mass public spectacle. Its form has even been co-opted as a universal symbol, used in political cartoons to represent public opinion or mob mentality, and in advertisements to signify classic endurance and timeless strength. The stone giant is no longer just a ruin in Rome. It is a shape, an idea, and a story that the entire world continues to tell itself again and again.